little bit while I talk? That would be helpful. All right. So, as Chris said, I'm laughing over here in the corner because it's absolutely every single family goes through these. And the examples that you put out there, I thought I hear this all the time in my own life with clients. So as Chris said, I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. So I work with individuals, couples, and families. And what I would love to talk about today is communication, and talking about when we don't communicate and when we miscommunicate. All right. So oftentimes, many of you have experienced a time where you didn't communicate or you were not communicating effectively. And oftentimes that makes us feel bad. It makes us feel isolated, frustrated, burdened, shut down, all of the feelings. And what I'll be doing today is I'll be sharing with you, I'm not going to be delving into a group therapy session today. However, I'll be talking about some strategies and skill sets at surface level that I hope that will be helpful for you to take home, think about, increase your awareness around, and hopefully apply to. While I'm not going to be asking anyone to be sharing their personal experiences, if there is anything that you feel like, hey, this is an example or this is an experience I had, please raise your hands. This is not formal. Raise your hand if you have a question or if you have an example that you would like to share, something you saw in a movie even, that's fine too. Anything that comes up that would be helpful, let me know. Or afterwards, if you want to pull me aside, I'm more than happy to talk with anybody afterwards about any questions, concerns, comments that you have. I did not communicate well with my husband. I switched cars with him today and all of my business cards were there. So I did not bring my business cards, but I can drop them off to Lucille at the office, and I can provide my information today as well. As well as a colleague of mine is also a licensed marriage and family therapist, if that would be helpful. So when we're thinking about communication, you'll notice that there's two big pieces of communication. One is exactly what we're saying, the words, the phrases that we're saying and how we're saying it. And then there's the way that we do interact with each other, the actual process of communication. So you'll be noticing that I'm going to start with the nuts and bolts, and then I'm going to be talking about the way that we interact with each other. Okay. And what I hope, I'm going to emphasize this again, what I hope that you can take from today, I do not expect that any of you will take every single skill and practice that I'm talking about today and bring it home. What I do hope that you can take from today is at least one skill or strategy that you just think about, increase your awareness of that, and hopefully put that into practice at some point. And hopefully that will help you come together with your loved one rather than push you away from them. So if you can take one skill or strategy today, then I will feel like I accomplished my goal. And the big piece of today is using communication to come together rather than letting it wedge between us. Okay. So you had talked about feelings, Chris. Well, I'm a therapist. You won't be shocked to hear that I'm going to talk to you guys about feelings today, emotions, right? So emotions are what we've learned about since we were young. I'm already teaching my 10-month-olds about emotions. But what I'm going to be sharing about with you today is primary emotions and secondary emotions. Now, some of you may be familiar with this. Most people I find are not. Primary emotion and a secondary emotion. A primary emotion is when something happens and it actually triggers something inside of us. Oftentimes, we are not aware of what that primary emotion is because of our upbringing, because of our culture, because of society, because feelings are hard to accept. We oftentimes mask that feeling with a secondary emotion. So when I'm hearing the example that Chris had introduced of going into that family's home earlier this week, I'm thinking that what you had seen, I heard agitated. Was that the word? Agitated, frustrated, mad. Do these sound familiar to anybody? Any of you ever experienced any of these feelings, right? These are feelings that oftentimes we use to mask what we're actually feeling. Oftentimes we come off as that. The primary feeling is what's actually going on. In that example, what I was hearing was struggling and accepting our independence and where that is now. Not feeling heard, right? Feeling like we're repeating ourselves, right? There's a lot of feelings underneath what actually comes off as angry and frustrated. Unfortunately, when we use that secondary emotion, it's not very approachable. When you hear or if you're around somebody who's angry or frustrated or shut down or numb, does that make you want to go up and talk to them? Absolutely not, right? So if we shared if we were able to recognize what our primary feeling was, which may be feeling unheard, disrespected, embarrassed, shame, guilt. If we were able to recognize those feelings and share those with our loved ones, that's much more approachable. We're much more willing to, I'm sorry, Chris, is it easier if I stand? Okay. So if we're able to recognize what those primary feelings are, what we're actually feeling, and share those feelings and needs with our loved ones, that's much more approachable, right? But it's hard to do that because one, it's hard to accept if that's actually what we're feeling, and we don't have practice in it. So what I hope that you can take from me introducing this concept, is that oftentimes there's something underneath that's actually going on, not what we're actually putting off. A way that I like to remind folks of remembering this is thinking about an iceberg. Are you all familiar with what an iceberg is? Right, Titanic, right? So you're going along the surface of the water and you see the tip of the iceberg. That's the only part of the iceberg that's showing. That's the secondary emotion. That's what typically comes off. Anger, frustration, burnt out, right? That's what typically comes off. But underneath that iceberg is so much more ice, right? Underneath that iceberg is actually what's going on. So I'm going to challenge you all to try to take the next few weeks and think about, is this actually what's going on? Am I showing that secondary emotion of the top of what people see, that surface emotion? What's actually going on? Because if we can actually identify what the primary emotion is that's going on for us, if we can identify that and share that feeling with our loved one, we're going to be more effective because we're addressing what's actually going on. We're not masking it. And two, it's going to help us come together with our loved ones. If we can share what we're actually feeling, what's actually going on for us, it's going to bring us together rather than looking at the secondary emotion, which is anger, frustration, burnt out, numb, shutting down. That pushes us away from our loved ones. It wedges between our relationships. Okay. Any questions about primary, secondary emotions? Has anyone ever thought about feelings in that way? I'm seeing a lot of head nods. Yeah. All right. So that's what we'll start off with. So now I'm going to go into more of the nuts and bolts. Oftentimes, a lot of my clients will say, this is so nitpicky. This doesn't make a difference. And then they'll start practicing it and you'll say years later, wow, that does make a difference. I didn't realize the impact of that. So I'm going to share with you a sentence. I'm going to switch one word in it. And I want you to tell me if you notice. You can nod, you can raise your hand and share. I want you to see if you notice a difference between the sentence that I say after the second time, okay? I love you, but we need to work on our communication. I love you, and we need to work on our communication. Does anybody notice a difference there? Yeah, what was the difference?
But
Yeah. Did it feel different?
yes.
Yeah. When we use but, it's such a small word, right? When we use but, it totally negates everything we just said. You might as well just not have said it, right? Has anyone experienced that situation? Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of nods. It's such a nitpicky word and it makes a difference, right? So that's one thing that I'll share with you is just being aware, and it's going to take some first recognizing when you're using it, recognizing when other people are using it, and then you can start prevent yourself from doing it. So thinking about when you can use the word and instead of but. And there's a place and time and place for but, just not in those situations. Always and never. You always do this to me. You never do this to me. If you're feeling like you're putting work and effort into something and it's not being recognized, do you want to do it again? No, right? Absolutely not. So when we use always and never with our loved ones, it totally takes away any acknowledgement of the work that we've put in, and it's going to shut that person down. It's going to make that person not feel like they need to put effort into that anymore or not want to. So trying to think about when you're using always and never. Now, I'm going to bet that whoever you came in here with today, you know pretty well. Is that right? I'm assuming you all know each other pretty well, whoever came in here together today. And that can work to our advantage in a lot of ways. I'm hearing this go in and out. So that can work in our advantage in a lot of ways when we know each other really well. We know that person's going to like this kind of milk and that, and they're not going to like this kind of milk. That can work in our advantage. Can you hear me or is this going in there?
Can't hear you now.
Is it because I'm walking around? Maybe? How's that? Technical difficulties. Oh, that's a good idea. There we go. All right. So in a lot of ways, knowing one another can work to our advantage, right? You know what they like, you know what they dislike. That can be very good until it's not, right? So two other things I'm gonna introduce are assuming. And excuse my language, but there's a very common phrase that is assuming makes an ass of you and me, right? A lot of you probably know this, right? When we assume something, then we're not communicating effectively and we're not giving that person a chance to actually present what they want to present, right? When we're assuming, we're going into a negative situation there. So I'm going to ask that you all just recognize when you're assuming something. Another big one is assuming that somebody knows what you're saying or assuming that they knew what you meant, right? That's a dangerous area because so often we have to be very direct, okay? So assuming and predicting one another's behavior. It can be a huge advantage when you know someone really well and you can predict what they're going to say. You know, I'm going to predict that they're not going to want this meal. They don't like steak, they like chicken, right? That can be helpful. What we don't want to predict is other people's behaviors or other people's reactions. Because if we predict that, so I'm going to, for an example, I'm not going to share that with them because they're going to be mad. Or I'm not going to invite them to today's luncheon because they're not going to want to come. Right? Did anybody have that experience today? I don't want to invite them. They're busy. Right? Well, let's give them the opportunity to let you know that. Right? So thinking about assuming and predicting. Okay, those are the two other big ones. There's a phrase that can be extremely helpful and it disarms us. It reminds us that we're working together. I introduced this topic by saying that communication or lack thereof can often wedge between our relationships. And I want to work in helping you bring communication to bring your relationships closer together to increase your connection. The phrase same team I use with all of my couples and families. There will be times where you miscommunicate, where you say the wrong things. There will be times where you say something in the wrong way. We can always repair that by saying something along the lines, and you can put it in your own words. Same team, right? I'm not saying this right. I'm not saying the right thing, but I need you to know that I'm on the same team, right? So just try practicing that with your loved ones. Same team, right? We're working towards the same goal here. We both love each other. We both want to be here. Same team. All right. Here's another one that I have a feeling a lot of you have experienced in one way or another. We can be listeners and we can be problem solvers, okay? Oftentimes, we prefer one or the other. When you are around a loved one and they are venting and they're uncomfortable, what do you typically want to do? Anybody, give me a range of hands. Who typically, your go-to is to listen? All right, we got some listeners here. Who feels uncomfortable by your loved one being uncomfortable and you want to make it go away? You want to problem solve it. I want it to go away. Yeah, I see a lot of problem solvers. Yeah. It's uncomfortable to see our loved ones uncomfortable, right? It doesn't feel good. We want it to go away. We want to problem solve it and we want it to go away. That doesn't work very well if that person doesn't want it to be solved, right? It makes them mad at you instead of the situation that they came into. Right. So I may be coming home from work saying, I had the toughest day. It was so hard. And my husband might say, well, you should do this, this, and this. I don't want to know how I can fix it. I just want him to listen. I want him to validate. Yeah, that was a tough day. Want to, let me make you dinner, right? That would be a miracle. So I don't want him to problem solve it. I want him to listen. Or there might be a time where he says, yeah, that's tough. And I actually want him to step in, get hands on, give me an example of what I can do differently next time. Right? So this nuts and bolts is practicing asking your loved one, do you want a problem solver or do you want a listener? And you can shift, put it in your own words. Do you want me to do something about it or do you want me to just validate? Right? Do you want me to listen? Do you want to vent or do you want me to do something? Okay. So just checking in because it might be different every time. Maybe they want a problem solver, but maybe they just want you to listen. And that will help you be a support to them and not shift it so that now the problem is actually you. And that wedges between the two of you. Going back to that theme of let's not let this communication go between you. Let's let you support one another. Okay. Any questions about the nuts and bolts? So thinking about primary feelings, secondary feelings, and but, always, never, same team, problem solver, listener. Okay. The last piece that I'm going to add to that is sharing your feelings and also sharing what you need from that person. Okay. Going back to that innate feeling that we always want to problem solve, we want to support one another, is if we can give someone direction as to what we need from them, that is a tangible directive. They can know what to do with that. If not, we're going to assume what that person needs. And what did we learn about assuming? Not effective, right? So something that I work a lot with my couples and my families is I coach them to share, I feel X, what I need from you is X. It may feel scripted, it may feel awkward, it works, okay? So I feel X, what I need from you is X. Let them know what you need from them, because then you're getting what you want instead of them creating what they think you want, which sometimes can be on the dot, but oftentimes is not. All right, so those were the nuts and bolts. So now as we're going into the process, we're going to have an activity that we'll do that we can practice those. But before we get to that, the way that we talk to each other. Does tone ring a bell? Anybody recognize the difference between tones, right? It's really important that we recognize what tone. And if we are, what I call my husband tone deaf, if we are tone deaf, ask, right? When in doubt, ask. Say, did you hear me? You know, did that come off the way that I wanted it to come off? So often we have an intention and a perception. What I intend to say may not be perceived in the way that I intended it. That happens all the time. I share with my clients a lot. You're both speaking English, but you're speaking totally different languages. You are not hearing what the other person is hearing. And that's a lot of what I do with couples and clients, with couples and families, is I watch them interact and we talk. And as I'm doing it, if I notice that that person is not hearing what that person's saying, what I think that they're intending to say, that's where I'll stop and we'll practice what we'll go into is reflective listening. So in thinking about tone, I want you to take note of assertiveness and passiveness, okay? What I take of as assertive may be different for somebody else, right? What someone may think of as passive may be different. It's a spectrum. So it really matters on checking in with that person. We want to be assertive enough that we're direct, that we're not assuming, but we don't want to be so passive that they don't have no idea what we're saying, right? There was no directive. We have to find that happy balance. And the only way to find that is to ask, check in with each other, okay? All right. So what I'm going to be practicing, what the activity that we're going to be doing today is reflective listening. Some of you may have done this before. I apologize. I'm going to make you do it again. My clients detest this and I still make them do it in every single session because it works. Reflective listening helps to clarify when we are not getting the intention versus perception and help us practice doing so. So what I mean by reflective listening is literally reflecting back to your loved one what it is that you hear them saying. An example of what I typically see, and I, out in the wild, as I say, as well as in my office, is someone saying a statement and then their loved one saying, I understand, but I hear what you're saying, but, right? Well, let's hear actually what you're hearing, because so often I find that we're not actually hearing each other. If you are, great, that shows that we're on the same page. And if you're not, what an opportunity to clarify. Okay. All right. So here's an example of what I might hear. So when I'm talking about reflective listening, I'm going to use the term sender and listener. So the sender is the person making the statement. The listener is the person who's reflecting back. Okay. So the sender may say something like, I feel so exhausted when I get home from work. The last thing I feel like doing is cleaning up around here. Yet I know it needs to be done. I would really like some help around the house. A typical reflection back that I might hear from the listener from that statement might be, you don't think I do enough and I'm not enough for you. Yeah, I'm hearing some laughs. Does this sound familiar? Right? Yeah. So what I would do in that situation is I would coach that person to say, well, I want you to share with that person what it is that you hear them saying. What exactly is it that you hear them saying? And then you can share, and that makes me feel like I'm not enough. That's not what you're hearing them say, right? So I want you to practice. I'm going to put you guys on the spot. I want you to look at the person, or I want you to, face the person that you came here with today. And I want you to share with them something that happened to you yesterday. It can be innocuous, it can be anything. I'm going to share with them something that happened to you yesterday. And I want them to reflect back what it is that they hear saying. Okay, we're going to do this a couple of times. And we're going to switch partners too, okay? So I want you to take a minute to share something that happened to you yesterday. It could be just one sentence, 1 or 2 sentences. I want your loved one to share back what it is that they hear you saying. All right, if you haven't done so already, I want you to switch. Now the person who reflected back, I want you to share the statement. Okay. So switch roles. All right, has everyone had a chance to be the sender and the listener? Can we get some nods if you were able to do both roles? Yeah. All right. What were your all experiences doing that? Aside from feeling uncomfortable and awkward, what was your experience in practicing that?
Positive.
Positive? All right, I see a hand here.
Yeah, I'll be the guinea pig. My wife and I yesterday together went for physical therapy, okay? That was the second thing on our agenda yesterday. But the first thing on our agenda yesterday, she came and said to me, vacuum cleaner is broken. I said, oh, let's look at it together and see what the issue is. So we did find out what the problem was on the vacuum cleaner. And then we made a phone call and we were on the phone, both of us at the same time, not talking both at the same time, but it took some time before they got the serial number, this, that, and every other thing. And then they said, well, we don't have the pot in stock. And when the pot comes in, we'll send you an email and then we'll send the pot out to you. So, I mean, my wife and I do have I would say a pretty good relationship. I mean, we do have our moments at times, but yesterday was light, nothing too complicated.
So in other words, we heard each other.
You heard each other. You were on the same page. Yeah. Your intention was matching your
Not always.
perception. True. So your intention was matching your perception. You were hearing what you were intending the other person to hear.
Yes.
Good. Did anyone have any other experiences in that activity? Did anyone notice that what they said wasn't reflected back to them accurately? Wow, we have some pretty good communicators in here. All right. So now what I want you to do is I want you to take into account the specific nuts and bolts that we had talked about. And, but, always, never, predicting, assuming, right? Giving each other the opportunity for change by not predicting. Same team, and sharing your feelings and needs. This is a vulnerable one. I'm challenging you guys today. I want you to turn to your loved one and I want you to share a feeling and a need. And I want you to take into consideration ands, buts, always, nevers, same team, listener, problem solver. You know, I had shared that it's important to ask the person, do you want a problem solver or a listener? It's also important for the sender to say, I want a listener. I want you to listen. I need you to listen. Or I need you to help problem solve this with me. So it can go on both ends, okay? So I want you to turn to your partner, your loved one, your family member, your friend, and I want you to share a feeling and a need and take into consideration some of those words and phrases that we've talked about, right? And you can be mad at me afterwards, that's okay. If you're mad at me, I'm doing my job.
Came to a stop.
And if you haven't done so already, switch roles. Make sure both of you have a chance to be the sender.
How do you feel? I asked you.
Right. Give you a minute to wrap up. Right. Has everyone had a chance to do that? Had a chance to be the sender and the listener? Yeah. All right. So did anybody notice a difference? Anyone notice a difference between the first exercise and the second exercise? Was the second exercise easier? It was. Good. Okay. What was it like? And feel free to raise your hand or just nod, either one. What was it like sharing a feeling and a need to your loved one?
Weight off your shoulders. How
A
about
weight
that?
A weight off your shoulders.
Yeah.
When we shared a feeling and a need, did we feel like did we hear back when the other person reflected back? What was that like? Did anyone have a situation where they had to clarify again? You guys have been listening. You all passed. All right. Yeah. So a big thing that I want to emphasize with reflective listening, and I'll be sending out a handout for whoever, whoever would find that helpful, is that reflective listening is a really important skill that we constantly practice. And if we get it wrong, great. It's an opportunity to clarify. There's no winning or losing in this. It's just trying to clarify and making sure that both of your intentions are matching your perceptions, that you're actually feeling heard. In that initial story that Chris was sharing, that mother wasn't feeling heard. She had said, I want it to eventually be in this corner. And she didn't feel like people were hearing her, right? That's frustrating, right? So feeling unheard was that primary feeling. And the secondary feeling that was coming out was frustration, anger. So we need to reflect back to people. And I'm wondering what it would have been like, for her loved one to say, I hear it's really important for you for that to be in the corner. We're going to make sure that it can go in that corner. Okay. So sometimes it's just about feeling heard, feeling respected, and feeling supported. And that goes for everybody, right? We've all experienced that before. So as a quick review, thinking about primary emotions, secondary emotions, and practicing really taking a minute to think about, is this really what's going on? Is this under the iceberg? What's actually going on that's making me feel frustrated, mad, angry, shut down, overworked? What's actually underneath that? And am I ready to share what's going underneath that? And can I share that feeling and what I need from my loved one in regards to that? How can I share that with the person? How can I make myself vulnerable and share that with the person that I love? With using ands instead of buts, avoiding always and nevers, using same team, sharing what we need from them in a direct way, in an assertive way, but not aggressive, right? Thinking about where we are with our tone. And trying to avoid predicting one another's behavior. Let's give our loved ones opportunities for growth, opportunities for change. Let's stop assuming that the other person knows what we're saying or assuming their behaviors. And let's practice reflective listening. Let's practice doing that. Sharing with the other person what it is that we're hearing and seeing if we're wrong or seeing if the other person actually hears what it is that we're saying. Now, I know this is probably all lovely that I'm saying all these things, teaching you these tools. Something that I preach a lot with my clients is that we can only use the tools that I'm introducing if you have the time. I talk about time, tolerance, and tools a lot. We can only practice these tools if we have the time and the tolerance for it. The only way that you're going to do that is self-care, right? And I'm sure that you hear this from a lot of other places in your life, but truly practicing the self-care so that you can take that minute to think, is this really what's going on for me? What is really going on for me? Take a breath so that you can tap into that. So you'll have the time and the tolerance to be able to work on this communication, right? Prioritize that. And that goes for everybody. And that is a big thing that I work on in my practice is what true self-care is and how we can get that. So with that said, any questions, comments? Yes.
I have one that strikes me from when you first started about listening, and it's the difficulty that I think some of us might have with listening is we don't know when it is that we're just simply supposed to passively listen, and when what is in the thing that we're listening to doesn't contain a sort of a subsurface plea for help. And I don't do this all the time, but I heard this one thing years ago, is that help is when it's asked for. So I would have to say theoretically, and I don't know if I'll be able to do this well, is if I'm supposed to listen, that's all I do. Even if I get lost in what is being said, it's just so that the other person knows that there is a sounding board there.
Thank you for sharing that. Absolutely. So you just tapped into two of the things that we spoke about today. So one is being a listener or a problem solver. Sounds like your loved one in that moment, you're recognizing they just need a listener. Right.
Life is complicated.
Life is very complicated. Yes. And so often we end up wanting it. We want a listener. And what you're struggling with is when I'm listening, is there like a hidden code in there that I missed? Right.
Yeah.
That's where the assertiveness versus passiveness comes in. We can't assume that you know how to decode that. We can't assume that. We have to be direct with our loved ones. We have to be assertive enough that they hear what we're saying. Not so assertive off that we come off as a jerk, right? That we come off aggressive, but assertive enough that we're being direct so that the other person doesn't have to assume. Okay, has anyone else had that experience? Yeah.
I have all the time.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's in the beginning, it was, I had to do everything. As soon as she'd get up, I was right on her back. Where are you going? What are you doing? She picks up her purse. What are you looking for? I got it off. And then it got to the point where she's just like, I got it. Give me a minute to like, and if I need it, I'll say, Angelina, can you find this for me? Can you do that for me? And it got to the point where now I'm just so laid back with her half the time that like people who don't know us, they'll look over, like when she comes down the stairs at her house, I just sit in the car because if I get on her back, she's gonna say, I got it. Okay. But then I see that people are passing and they're looking at her with the stick, and I'm just sitting in my car listening to music. They're probably thinking, what is wrong?
What a monster.
Well,
And it's better for us because we have so
A lot.
much more communication now. Before it was like, I didn't want to hear it. She'd say, I got it. I'm like, no, you
she's got some time.
don't.
You assumed she
I
didn't.
did. I would always, as soon as she'd get up, I'm like, no, you don't got it. Pick up the jar, or like, give it to me. I'll do it, you know, so. But it's communication is helpful a lot more. And also brings it back on board too.
Which ultimately, yeah, and it decreased your workload,
Right,
right? So it made it your job less work, and it also gave your mom a voice,
yeah.
right? She felt heard.
You backed off a little.
Too much.
She still shows her love in other ways.
She's still there, you know, hot and heavy. But as far as communication, we had to learn how to, we had to learn how to communicate with each other. Because I'm not just blind, I'm also going through cancer. So I didn't want to tell her, I didn't want to tell my family, I didn't want to, so there was this wall up. When I did start to communicate with all of my children, she's the youngest of 6. She's the one that took it really, really hard, really bad. And I didn't want to depress her, make her depressed.
It was like what he was saying too, with
So-
you wait, you don't do things until someone asks you for help, you
Yeah.
know, so.
So we had to learn how to, we kind of had to learn how to deal with each other, and not put people, you know,
Because then you'll say things like, I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to get upset.
right.
You were predicting each other's
Right,
behaviors.
Exactly,
Right.
so then we just wouldn't say anything to either one, you know, how we were feeling or what it's like, I don't want her to be sad, I don't want her to be stressed, so. But yeah, communication with parents and barriers are hard, but
Thank you for sharing that. And that brings up another point too, is I talk a lot in my practice about risking connection. I understand that what I'm asking you to do of sharing your feelings and your needs is vulnerable. Probably why we don't do it naturally, right? We avoid things that hurt. We avoid things that are uncomfortable. And so when I do challenge my clients to talk about these things, and my family and friends for things, I'm challenging you to risk the connection, right? And a lot of what the two of you are sharing is that it's kind of trial and error, right? It's figuring out what worked, what didn't work. And knowing that we're on the same team, and that even when it didn't work, our intentions were that we're doing this together. It's coming out of love and support. Thank you for sharing that. I saw a hand over in the corner.
Oh, it's not really important, but I was going to say that I had a set of professors in college that were married, and they used to use the term with each other. He would say to her, do you need me to fix this, to solve this problem, or do you need a soft place to land? And I always took that with me, and I thought that's a great way to, you know, it's to the point, but it's kind, and it's showing that you're there listening in a way. So I just that always stuck with me all the time.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Do you need a problem solver or a soft place to land?
Do you need me to solve this problem, or do you just need to solve it?
Do you need me to solve that problem, or do you need a soft place to land? And it just shows that there are multiple ways of supporting. Yeah. Yes.
This might be a slightly different spin, but my husband lost most of his sight 6 months ago. And I'm at the age, female, where I'm going through a lot of stuff myself. So that, along with our 27-year-old son who's autistic, I have been in that role of, you know, having to constantly having to, you know, have my to-do list of what do I have to do for Andrew's today, and I gotta do these errands, and I have to do this, and oh, I forgot to do this, and all that, so I was like, walking around with my head cut off, and I got stuck in that mode, especially after, Don's very sudden loss of his vision, and, I had to stop myself and say, okay, wait, what do you need from me? What do you want me to do? You need to tell me, back off if I'm doing too much.
I like that you directly asked.
Because that will help me too.
Right.
And this guy's a fixer. He immediately jumped into action. He came up with, okay, I can't see anymore, so what can I do instead? And he's the problem solver. And he's done people on start.
And what a great way to show that there is a time and place for problem solving, right? In that moment, you didn't want a listener, you wanted a problem solver,
Yeah.
right? You wanted hands-on, give me some tactics here.
Yeah, but I was trying to be the problem solver at the same time, it was a scary place for me because I'm not used to that. I have a multitude of health issues and I'm used to him looking after me. So suddenly when this happened, I was like, oh my God, just total panic. And he helped me by doing the things that needed to be done that he knew he could do for himself.
You had to go into listener mode. And what I'm noticing in a lot of a theme and a lot of what I'm hearing too is that if we can effectively communicate, then we can work smarter, not harder, right? None of you have time to be miscommunicating, to be feeling hurt or pushed away or shut down by your loved ones, right? Let's work smarter, not harder. Let's check in with each other. And at first it will take more work. It will get harder before it gets better, right? And it will be helpful in the long run because then you'll eventually be a well-greased wheel and you'll be working smarter, not harder, effectively communicating with each other, right? Being on the same page. Anything else that came up for anyone or any other questions, examples?
When you talk about communication with our loved one, I understand that. But what if you have a few close friends and the minute you begin to share something from inside or something I'm doing, it's like they back away. I had one guy cry on me and just said, oh, the doctor said just don't listen. And is this the kind of thing we should do with our friends? Because I feel like they back away because they're afraid. Yeah, they don't know what to do. I'm hoping. But it's very it's hurtful on this side, and I try not to do that. I just, when I'm with that gal, all of this right now is off limits. I wouldn't do it because she got so upset. And I've had another girl from, oh God, over 30 years. All of a sudden, it's not the same. And it's like she's backing away. And I don't feel like I can say, gee, could you give me a hand on your own time when you want? I might need some help. So it's awful. And then even with the kids, I have two. Wendy has really stepped up for me. Her brother is a little still denial kind of thing. I had the cane out, but it was folded, and he came into the house, and I said, "Hey, look." He went, "Yeah, Ma, I saw it," and it was like he couldn't deal. So when you're in situations like that, a loved one or a close friend, we know each other's secrets, so there's no, I can't cut that out. But I don't know, is this the same thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'm hearing a lot of possible primary feelings and secondary feelings, right? Your son is feeling shut down because really what he's feeling is scared, terrified, not accepting, right? And so he's coming off as shut down, and we're assuming that they don't want to talk about it, right? Because it feels vulnerable, right? We don't want to feel hurt. We don't want to hurt others. Yeah. So something I talk a lot about is that we can't control other people's behaviors, right? So your friend may not be ready to talk about it, but that doesn't mean you can't talk about it. So what I would encourage you to do is share with her, I feel I feel nervous or I feel X when you do this. What I need from you is X. So share with your friend what you just shared with us, you know, in what feels comfortable. Of I feel like you're not ready to hear this. What I need for you is to let me know when you are. Right.
So I would say something, because I've had very bad hearing.
Mhm. Thank you for reflective listening.
I'm not, oh God, I'm old too. I like, yeah. Do I just approach it and say, I don't know what to say.
Put the elephant out in the room. Share what, use the I statement. I feel what I need from you is.
So I wouldn't start off with, I feel as though I make you uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah?
Absolutely. Yeah,
I feel like I can't really talk about this in front of you.
absolutely. Because they may be assuming that you don't want to talk about it. They may be predicting that you would get uncomfortable if they brought it up. We don't know, right? We can't control their behavior. But what we can do is practice our own effective communication skills, which is being direct, right? Sharing our I statements. I feel what I need from you is. And you can share your own primary feelings, right? What's actually going on for you. And maybe that could model for your son who's feeling like he's struggling with that acceptance, feeling nervous. And you could even say, I'm wondering if you're feeling like you're not accepting this yet. I'm wondering.
I'm wondering. You're not accepting.
Or I'm wondering if this is scary for you.
That's how it is.
Yeah. And some people aren't ready, right? And we're not going to be able to emotion coach everybody because some people don't want to and they're just not there yet and they may never be, and that's okay. What I'm asking for you to do is practice these effective communication skills yourself, because you can practice them and you can model them. And at the end of the day, you know that you are direct, you are putting everything out there. Okay. Does that answer your question?
I think it does, yes. I'm afraid, a little, concerned about it. I told Wendy when these things have happened, because I'm in such shock. And I just feel like, they're really not friends. I just want to get rid of that feeling.
Yeah, does not feel good. And oftentimes when somebody's unfamiliar with a situation or uncomfortable with one, it takes somebody else bringing it into the conversation. It takes someone putting the elephant out in the room to know that there's permission to talk about this. And we would rather communicate and try to clarify with each other than not communicate. I think over here in the corner, you had shared that you guys weren't talking to each other. You just isolated one another.
We would joke, we'd laugh and make jokes with each
put a-
other
put a
and
wall
act like nothing wasn't, we act like the elephant wasn't there. Or we would joke about it, I'd be like, I'm gonna take your stick and keep it, and we'd laugh, but then other times it's like, okay, well, don't play around with it, don't mess with it, keep it over here, because then my kids will grab it and then they'll play with it and think it's a toy, so. It was tough, but my siblings are the same way, like her son is, they're like, and they act like it's not there. They, so I feel like I gotta take on the bulk of everybody because
And there's five
everyone
of them.
around her, it's acting
There's
like
five-
it's
I
not
have 6.
reality.
She's the youngest of the 5, and I have 5 children, older than her, who are living in denial because mom has always been
Done everything.
the stronghold, and now mom is not. They have presumed that I'm not who I used to be, that strong, independent mom. So with the help of her jumping in and them seeing that she was like them, I think she'll set an example. You have to set an example for our onlookers and our families. If we show them that we are independent and that we are strong and we really are working hard to not be in their head, they think we're disabled, they think there's something wrong with us, or we're sick, or they have all these things in their head of what we are, except because we can't do the things we used to do. But if we can show them positive, in a positive way, it helps them a lot, because a lot of times what you say goes in one ear and comes out the other because it's more comfortable for them. But when they watch, like I know my 5 other children are watching me to see how I get through, you know, not just losing my eyesight, but also through my cancer. They're watching me to see how well I get through this. Then I think that they'll come, you know, the other children will come in and start to accept it when they see. If you show them that you haven't accepted it yourself yet, then they're not going to accept it. You know, so you have to be, you know, really strong. As she was saying, the self-recognition, the self-love first, and then other friends who kind of stepped away from you will come back to you because they see that you're being able to handle, you know, you still are the same person that you used to be. You know, that's how I see it.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and it's putting that elephant out in the room. It's you directly saying it head on and bringing it up so that other people are not predicting your behavior, not predicting that she's not independent anymore, she can't do this, right? So it's preventing that predicting behavior and assuming, and it's putting it out there. It's speaking assertively and directly about what's going on and giving an opportunity for change, an opportunity to share feelings, to share needs from one another. Right? And you brought up something really important. I'm so glad that you brought this up, is that communication is not just verbal, right? There's so many other ways of communicating, and there's a lot of body language that's involved with that. So practice what we talked about today in verbal communication, and then also be mindful of what your body language is giving off as well. Anything else that came up for anyone? Any questions, concerns? Yeah.
Yeah, well, you just brought something up and I caught. You talk about body language. That's not really possible if you're a blind person, because for the simple fact that is, if you can't read through their voice on what they're saying, or how, say, in some instances, sarcastic they're trying to be, or they are, what's your second mode to do this?
Thank you. That's a very great point. So recognizing that if somebody can't see what you're giving off as body language and showing them, that can be through physical touch, right? We can use physical touch, we can use verbal language. So recognizing, again, intention versus perception. So your wife may give you a body language that you're not perceiving, right? Talk about a lack of, right? Talk about intention versus perception, right? So that would be a chance where it would be important to try to reflect that and to increase your awareness of, did that person get what I was intending to give, and vice versa. So recognizing body language that maybe includes physical touch might be way more effective. Thank you for bringing that up. If anybody wants to pull me aside at the end, please feel free to. I'm happy to answer any